The night began like so many others with the clink of dishes and the faint smell of roasted chicken filling the family dining room. I was laughing about a client's bizarre wallpaper choice when my father slammed his glass onto the table, the sharp sound silencing me mid-sentence. His voice cut across the room like a blade as he declared that I had 2 days to gather my belongings and leave. The house, he said coldly, belonged to my brother now. For a moment I froze with my fork hovering in the air, unable to process what I'd just heard. My brother Colt, who hadn't lived in this house for years, was suddenly heir to everything I had poured myself into. My mother's eyes darted downward, avoiding mine, while my father leaned back in his chair, his arms folded as though the matter was already decided. My stomach churned, but I did not argue. Instead, I pushed my plate away and walked to my room with a calm they mistook for surrender. What they didn't realize was that I was already planning. They thought I would vanish quietly, but within 48 hours they would regret every word they had said. Lying in bed the next morning, I stared at the pale blue ceiling I had painted myself 3 years earlier. Every corner of the house carried my mark, from the chandelier in the dining room to the gray sofa in the living room. When the bank threatened to foreclose back in 2022, I had stepped in. At just 27, barely starting my career as an interior designer, I had emptied my savings, $60,000 I'd scraped together from endless freelance projects, to pay off my parents' crushing debt. That money had been my future, the down payment for my own place someday, but I gave it willingly to protect the home that held my childhood, my sketches, and the memories of growing up. The repairs never ended. I painted, hammered, sanded, and replaced. I bought new furniture, updated appliances, and revived every room with care. I was the one who purchased the television for my mother's favorite cooking shows and the washing machine when the old one collapsed in rust. Each item had been bought with my own money, with weekends stolen from rest and poured into work. I thought my parents saw that they valued what I was building for them and for us. But they did not. Colt had been gone for 5 years, chasing skyscrapers and empty promises in New York. He called only a couple of times each year, his conversations full of boasts about deals that never seemed to close. Yet my parents clung to every word, their voices swelling with pride whenever they spoke of him to neighbors. Meanwhile, I was the one sanding floors late into the night, keeping the house from collapsing into dust. Still, they looked at him as the golden child, the son, whose absence somehow shone brighter than my presence. I remembered vividly the day 3 years ago when the bank threatened foreclosure. My father sat at this same dining table, head in his hands, murmuring that we might lose everything. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying, but Colt never answered when I called him for help. "He's busy," my mother had whispered, as though that excused his silence. I had not hesitated. I walked into the bank with my $60,000 and signed it away, thinking gratitude would bind us closer. They hugged me then, but gratitude has a short memory. Now, sitting in that same room where I had saved them, my father told me the house was no longer mine. Rage simmered beneath my skin, sharper than sorrow. I had fought for this place, given it new life, and now it was being handed to someone who had abandoned us. By mid-morning, my phone was in my hand as I called Lindsay, my closest friend and a lawyer, with a mind sharp enough to slice through the fog of betrayal clouding my thoughts. I poured out everything: the ultimatum at dinner, the years of sacrifice, and the $60,000 I had given up. She listened carefully before asking a question I hadn't considered had I checked their finances. If they were desperate enough to evict me, there might be more beneath the surface. Her words sparked something in me. I had always known my parents were secretive about money, but this felt different. I needed answers, and I knew who could help me find them. I scrolled through my contacts until I reached Finn Walsh, a banker I had once designed an office space for. He owed me a favor, and I wasn't afraid to call it in. When he picked up, I explained the situation quickly. Could he check if anything had been taken out in my name, loans, accounts, Anything unusual?" He agreed, his tone grave. An hour later, Finn called back, his voice heavy with the kind of truth that changes everything. He told me there was indeed a loan, $60,000 taken out 6 months earlier, with my name listed as the primary borrower. My parents and Colt were listed as co-borrowers, but if it defaulted, the responsibility fell on me. My breath caught as he sent me the documents. Staring at the screen, I saw my name written in bold letters, accompanied by a signature that looked like mine, but wasn't. The loops and tails were wrong, but convincing enough to pass at a bank. My parents and Colt had used my identity. They had forged my name. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft. Identity theft, as Lindsay would later call it. And it was proof that I wasn't being paranoid. They hadn't only taken the house. They had stolen my future. I knew then that I would not leave quietly. I was no longer just fighting for a home. I was fighting for myself, and I had every intention of winning. That evening, I climbed into the attic, dust swirling in the dim light as I pulled box after box across the floorboards. Lindsay's advice echoed in my mind. We needed more evidence. My hands trembled as I sifted through envelopes, receipts, and stacks of brittle papers. Most of it was routine utility bills, tax documents. But buried under a mess of receipts, I found a folder with no label. Inside was a bank letter addressed to my parents referencing the $60,000 loan. Payments were behind. My stomach knotted tighter as I flipped to the next page and found a duplicate of the forged loan agreement. Finn had already sent me my false signature scrawled across the bottom. I sank onto the attic floor, the papers trembling in my grip. Everything fell into place. Colt had come back to Missoula around the same time the loan was approved, tail between his legs after New York spat him out. He needed cash. My parents helped him, and they did it by using me. They counted on my loyalty, my silence. But now I had the evidence to prove their crime. Betrayal didn't cover what I felt. It was devastation sharpened into fury. I stuffed the documents into my bag and marched downstairs, my mind racing faster than my heart. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every curtain and lamp I'd bought came back into focus. They weren't family heirlooms. They weren't my parents' property. They were mine. If they wanted me gone, fine. But I wasn't leaving behind what I had poured myself into. With a notepad in hand, I walked through the house room by room, writing down every item I had purchased. The gray sofa, the flat-screen television, the washing machine, the curtains, the chandelier, the rugs. Each was a piece of my life, proof of my sacrifices. I labeled them with sticky notes, a quiet claim on what was rightfully mine. Then I pulled out my laptop, searched for local moving companies, and booked a same-day service with a Missoula crew who promised to be at the house by 2 p.m. My father had given me 48 hours. I would take less than half that time, but on my terms. The knock at the door pulled me from my planning. Diane Burke, our neighbor, stood on the porch with a plate of cookies. Her gray hair was swept back, her eyes lined with quiet concern. "You okay, Whitney?" she asked gently, stepping inside. Something in her voice cracked through the wall I'd built around myself. I told her what happened at dinner, not about the loan just yet, but about my father's ultimatum and my parents' decision to hand everything to Colt. Diane's frown deepened, her eyes scanning the house around us. "I've watched you repaint these walls, carry furniture in the rain, fix that porch by yourself. You've done more for this house than anyone. They can't take that away from you." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She saw what my parents never acknowledged. She noticed. For a moment, I wasn't alone. By the time the movers arrived, a 3-man crew in Navy uniforms, I was ready. They carried the sofa, rolled up the rugs detached, the television, folded the curtains, and unhooked the chandelier. Piece by piece, my life left the house and filled the truck. I didn't feel sadness as the rooms emptied. I felt clarity. I was reclaiming what was mine. While the movers worked, I called Lindsay to update her. "This isn't just family betrayal," she said firmly. This is identity theft and fraud. We'll file a lawsuit. The forged documents, the receipts for the furniture, your history of keeping this house alive, it's airtight. Tomorrow, we go to court. When the movers left at 4:00 p.m., I stood in the hollow living room, the walls echoing back my footsteps. For the first time, the house looked like what it had always been, an empty shell I had worked endlessly to fill. My parents had mistaken my devotion for weakness. They had thought I would bow to their will. But they were wrong. The door burst open. Colt stormed in, a suitcase banging against the floor. His tie was loose, his eyes red with anger. He stopped short at the sight of the stripped walls and bare floor. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted, his voice breaking the silence. "This is my house now. Where's the furniture?" I crossed my arms steady as stone. I took what's mine. The sofa, the TV, the washing machine, the curtains, the things I paid for. "You didn't lift a finger for any of it." His face twisted, his bravado slipping. "You don't get to decide that. Dad said this house is mine, and you're supposed to be gone." I pulled the forged loan agreement from my bag and held it up. "I know about the $60,000 loan, the one you and Mom and Dad took out in my name. This signature isn't mine. You forged it." For a split second, his eyes flickered with panic before he tried to smirk it away. "You're making this up. You're just bitter because I'm back. And you're out." "I have proof," I said sharply. "Finn at the bank sent me the documents. Your name is right here alongside theirs, but I'm the one on the hook if it defaults. You thought I wouldn't find out." His phone rang, our father's name flashing on the screen. He answered, his voice frantic. "Dad, she stripped the house. Everything's gone." He paced furiously, gesturing at the bare walls. As he ranted, the door opened again. Henry King, our neighbor from 2 houses down, stepped inside. His calm eyes swept the empty room before settling on me. "Everything okay here, Whitney?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Just having a conversation with my brother." Henry glanced at Colt, then back at me. "I've seen you keep this place alive. You don't deserve to be treated this way. If you need anything, I've got your back." Colt's face reddened, his hands curling into fists. "You're pathetic," he spat at me. "Always playing the victim. Mom and Dad know who really matters." I stepped closer, my voice firm. "If I'm so pathetic, why'd you need my name to get that loan? Why'd you come crawling back when New York chewed you up and spit you out?" His bluster faltered. He muttered a threat, grabbed his suitcase, and stormed out the door. The slam rattled the windows, but I didn't flinch. I held the papers tightly, my resolve sharper than ever. Tomorrow I would take this fight to court. They thought I would walk away. Instead, I was just getting started. That night, I loaded my car with the bag full of documents and drove to Lindsay's apartment. Her place was small but warm, a desk piled with case files and a laptop already humming. I spread the papers across her dining table, the forged loan agreement, the bank's overdue notice, and the receipts I had collected for the furniture. The sight of my falsified signature lying in the middle of it all made my stomach twist, but Lindsay's expression never wavered. She read silently, then began typing with rapid precision. "We have them," she said finally. "Identity theft, financial fraud, and proof of your financial contributions to the house. This isn't just strong, it's ironclad." We worked side by side late into the night, piecing everything into a formal complaint. Every detail mattered: the $60,000 I had given to save the house years earlier, the list of furniture I had purchased, the loan forged in my name, the supporting testimony from neighbors who had seen me keeping the place alive. By midnight, Lindsay had shaped it into a 20-page lawsuit accusing my parents and Colt of fraud. When she slid the papers toward me, I signed without hesitation. The following morning, we drove downtown to the Missoula County Courthouse. The air was crisp, the brick building looming against a pale sky. Filing the lawsuit felt both surreal and grounding. The clerk's stamp echoed like a gavel, final and irreversible. Outside, the Montana air stung my cheeks as I took a long breath. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine anymore. It was about justice, about refusing to be erased. In the days that followed, my phone buzzed with calls from my parents. First my mother, her voice broken, asking how I could turn on them. Then my father, sharp and furious, blaming me for ruining the family. Colt left a message dripping with venom, calling me selfish, warning me I'd regret it. I didn't answer any of them. Their words no longer had the power they once did. Instead, I focused on gathering more evidence. Finn at the bank provided official confirmation of the loan details. Diane and Henry, my neighbors, each signed affidavits describing the countless times they had seen me repairing furnishing and maintaining the home. Every piece strengthened the case layer by layer. When my parents and Colt were formally served, I imagined the shock on their faces. For once, they would have to confront the reality they had created. The case moved quicker than I expected. Within weeks, we were standing in a small courtroom paneled in wood, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. On one side, I sat with Lindsay, my chest tight, but my gaze steady. Across from us sat my parents and Colt. My father's jaw was clenched, my mother's eyes downcast, and Colt slouched in his chair, fiddling with his phone, as though he could pretend none of this was real. Lindsay presented our case with sharp precision. She laid out the forged loan documents, pointed out the inconsistencies in the signature, and detailed my financial history with the house. She showed receipts, bank statements, and even photos of me repainting the porch and carrying in furniture. Every word cut deeper into the image my parents had built around Colt as their golden child. Their lawyer tried to argue I had consented to the loan, that I had known all along. But the evidence was too strong, the lies too flimsy. The judge examined the documents carefully, his face unreadable before finally leaning forward. His voice was calm, but firm, as he declared the loan void, my name cleared, and my parents and Colt responsible for damages and court fees. The house itself, tied to the fraudulent loan, was to be sold to settle the debt. The words hit like both a victory and a loss. I was free, my credit safe, my future intact. But the house, the place I had saved, rebuilt, and fought for, would no longer be mine. It would be sold, its walls and rooms no longer my burden nor my refuge. I didn't stay to see my family's faces as the ruling was read. I walked out of the courthouse into the brisk Montana air, Lindsay at my side. For the first time in years, the weight pressing down on me lifted. The house was gone, yes, but so was the stranglehold my family had kept on me. Weeks later, the gossip spread quickly through Missoula. The bank foreclosed and the house sold at auction for barely enough to cover the debt. My parents and Colt moved into a cramped apartment at the edge of town. Colt found a job at a local car dealership, his New York dreams long since crumbled into dust. My parents, once so proud to boast about their successful son, now struggled to pay rent and utilities. They left me voicemail after voicemail, my mother pleading, my father scolding Colt, alternating between threats and desperate apologies. I deleted them all. I had no desire to hear their voices anymore. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their burdens. I wasn't patching up their mistakes. I wasn't holding the family together while being cast aside. I was finally free to build something of my own. Spring settled over Missoula by the time the dust began to clear. The lawsuit was behind me, the house was gone, and my family had become little more than voices on a blocked call log. At first, the silence felt strange, almost hollow. For years, I had lived in the echo of their demands, their disappointments, their blind devotion to Colt. Now the quiet was mine alone, and slowly it began to feel like freedom. I moved into a small apartment not far from the Clark Fork River. The building wasn't grand, but sunlight poured through the windows in the morning, catching the threads of my curtains and lighting up the space in a way that made me breathe easier. I placed the gray sofa I had fought to reclaim against the wide front window. The television I'd once bought for my mother's cooking shows was now mine, mounted on the opposite wall. The washing machine hummed softly in a utility closet, a steady reminder of the independence I had clawed back. Every piece carried a history, but here they were no longer symbols of sacrifice. They were proof of survival. Work at the design firm blossomed in ways I hadn't expected. Freed from the constant pull of family obligation, I threw myself into projects with a focus sharper than ever before. I redesigned a local cafe, layering warm woods with soft lighting until it felt like a place where anyone could belong. I mapped out a boutique hotel lobby, modern and sleek, with colors that reminded me of the pale blue ceiling I had once painted in my parents' house. My colleagues praised my creativity, clients sought me out, and for the first time I felt the kind of momentum that comes only when you stop carrying someone else's weight. Missoula itself seemed to open its arms to me. Neighbors stopped by to tell me how proud they were of the way I had stood up for myself. Diane Burke brought me coffee one morning, her smile wide as she said, "Everyone knows what they did. People here don't forget. But they've seen you fight back, and they respect you for it." Henry King waved when we crossed paths downtown, always offering a nod of quiet encouragement. Their kindness stitched into the fabric of my days, replacing the ache of betrayal with something sturdier: community, support, belonging. News of my parents and Colt trickled in now and then. Missoula was a small place after all. Word spread that they were still in that cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, Colt selling cars with none of the swagger he once carried. My parents scraping by, their reputation soured. Once hearing that would have filled me with guilt, maybe even pity. Now it didn't. They had chosen Colt over and over, even when it meant betraying me. They had stolen my savings, forged my name, and tried to cast me aside. Whatever consequences they now faced were of their own making. I no longer lost sleep over their choices. Instead, I spent evenings on my sofa sketching designs by lamplight. I tried new recipes in the kitchen, letting music fill the air instead of tense silence. On weekends, I walked by the river, the mountains rising in the distance, reminding me how vast the world still was. Each day felt like a step into a life that was truly mine. Sometimes the memories crept back: the night at the dinner table when my father slammed his glass the moment I saw my forged signature, the sound of Colt shouting in the empty living room. But instead of bitterness, those memories stirred something else: resolve. They were proof of what I had endured, and what I had risen from. One evening, sitting with a notebook open on my lap, I realized the deepest lesson of it all. For so long, I had confused loyalty with self-sacrifice. I believed being a good daughter meant giving until there was nothing left. But love without respect is not love at all, and loyalty without boundaries is a trap. I had walked into that trap willingly, but I had fought my way out stronger than I'd ever been. I wasn't the daughter who fixed everything anymore. I wasn't the shadow of Colt's false brilliance. I was Whitney, a designer, a fighter, a woman who had built her own life from the wreckage of betrayal. And as I leaned back against the sofa, bathed in golden light from the setting sun, I knew I had finally reclaimed what mattered most: myself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.